Hello everyone, welcome to my walking tour. My name is David and I'm going to be your guide today. We're going to go around the beautiful city of Edinburgh. I'm going to tell you a bit about Edinburgh's history and a bit about its folklore. Now, you might have noticed I don't sound very Scottish. I'm actually originally from Australia. Now, I came here 8 years ago after a European trip. Now, I studied criminology. I also started performing arts acting. And before starting a career, I wanted to do something different. So I went on a European trip, ran out of money, then came here to Edinburgh. I was just trying to get a job. Now, I got a job as a tour guide and I loved it to pieces. I was first just a general history tour guide, then I became a castle tour guide, then a horror tour guide, then a Harry Potter tour guide. I loved it all, but in the back of my mind, I always thought I was going to return to Australia. But that's until I met a woman, I fell in love, I got married, I got stuck here. But I still love Edinburgh, I still love my job, and I still love my wife. They're the main things. But my job has changed a little bit over the past year, because I used to be able to take people around in person. And it was so much fun, and then suddenly you can't take big groups around anymore. Now that is changing. We are going to be able to take around groups very, very soon. In fact, I think it's already started, and I'm going to be doing that soon. But in the meantime, in the past year, I started doing virtual tours. Tours from the safety of your own home. Now, at the end of the tour, you can check out my links and see the virtual tours I do. I do a virtual horror tour. I also do a virtual Harry Potter tour. And that's all done from my house, backwards and forwards from Zoom, in the comfort of your own home. But we're going to do something a bit different today. I'm going to do a live stream from the city. Now, one thing I do ask, it has been pretty tough on tour guides like me the past year. So if you really did like this live stream, there's two things you can do. You can donate to me. You'll see my PayPal and my PayPal me. That will be linked in the chat. Also, you'll see my website if you want to check out my other tours. And what would help me out a lot as well is if you ask me questions. See, I also like to respond to people. I have a lot of stories in my mind, but they come out so much more naturally when you ask me questions. And I can actually relate to I can actually tell you what you want to hear, rather than whatever's going on in my head. But now let's start things up. We're going to start walking up the mile. So I'm just going to flip around. Now I can see people from New Mexico, from Cyprus. I can see some fellow Scots on the tour as well. And from Berlin. Awesome. They're actually starting, we're walking out the Canongate Kirkyard, right here. This is Canongate Kirk, going back to 1688. But this ain't a graveyard tour. Well, we're going to see another graveyard. I'm gonna, if you want to see more graveyards, maybe come on my next horror tour. But a little bit of a backstory about this city to start things off. First of all, Edinburgh is a very old city. There's a lot of really great dark history, but most of the history is oral history. Now, we know there's been a settlement here since around 850 BC. The first written account was from the Romans, who wrote about the Voldini who lived in this area. In the 4th century, there were 4 major tribes competing for this land. The first were the native Picts. They were called the Picts by the Romans, who fought the Romans completely naked with blue pitches all over their bodies. Then came the Scots. I actually might just focus on me for a little bit. Then came the Scots. Now the Scots, some say they came from Ireland. There's a myth that they actually originated all the way over in Egypt. It's a very long story there. But they came across, were also competing for this land. Then came the Norse, the Vikings, and then also the Brythonic people, who were best associated with the Welsh. Now they were all competing for this land, and it all came together around 850, when a man called Kenneth MacAlpin, who some historians say was a Pict, others say he was a Scot, united with a Highlander tribe of Scots, or Picts, depending on what you read. But he was established as the first king. He managed to unite a few tribes, bring together some sort of order over the land, and he was said to be crowned on the Stone of Scone, which we nowadays call the Stone of Destiny. This is a very important stone because every Scottish king was crowned on it until the English stole it in 1297. And that was Edward I of England, who beat the Scots in the Battle of Dunbar and declares himself the king. The Scots fight back, and the first man to put a dent in the English armour is William Wallace. Now, many of you might have seen the movie Braveheart, which is a really inaccurate movie. By the way, Mel Gibson, who played William Wallace, he's about 5'5". William Wallace is said to be around 6'5". There's actually photos from the set of him either standing on a box or all the men around him basically squatting down to try to make him look bigger. Now, William Wallace, he won the Battle of Stirling Bridge, and he became the guardian of Scotland. He later got betrayed by one of his men, and they got sent down to England where he was hung, drawn, and quartered. To spare some grisly details, basically they hang you, then they open you up, take out your insides, then strap your limbs to horses, and they run off in 4 different directions. Then they chop your head off to make sure you're dead. Now, the next man to rise was Robert the Bruce. He lost 6 battles in a row against the English. He then went to a cave, and as the legend goes, he watched a small spider trying to make its way across. And the spider failed 6 times. But on the 7th try, the spider made it all the way across and started spinning its web. Now, if you come here to Scotland, you might notice that the currency is a little bit different than the currency down in England. And if you see the Clivesdale banknote, it actually has Robert the Bruce and the spider. Unfortunately, I don't have a 20 on me. I wish I did. But anyway, he came out of the cave, he crowned himself the King of the Scots, and in the Battle of Bannockburn, they finally defeat the English. And the English have to give the Stone of Destiny back to the Scots, but they said they lost it. Then they started making excuses, because they were meant to give it back, and there was a few attempts, and quite often there were protests by the English saying, no, we're not giving it back. They would actually, people would actually would go around Westminster Abbey and say, no, keep the stone there. And the English were like, all right, fine, we're keeping it. Now I'll get into how we finally got the stone back a little later on. But now we're coming up to where the old city walls used to be. You see, Edinburgh used to be a walled-in city. One moment. Now that goes back to 1517 when they finished the Flodden Wall. Now that went around the south of the city, and on the north we had the Norloch, a massive swamp. Now people used to throw their toilets out the window, it all had to go somewhere, so it came down the closes and filled up the valley. Now it's from the city walls that actually establishes the old town of Edinburgh. Now they believed everything outside the city walls, was the World's End, marked here by the World's End pub. Just get that off screen. There we go. That's because they used to tax people every time they tried to leave, and the commoners could not afford the tax. And generation after generation of people who lived here in Edinburgh could not leave the city walls. The only thing outside the city walls was death and a place called England, where the English come from. That's about all they really knew, or all they really cared to know about. Now they used to decorate the entrance here by putting dead bodies on it, or putting like limbs and heads to say if you break the laws of the city, this is the fate that awaits you. Now you can see it marked out in those golden bricks on the ground. That's where the city gates used to be. Now this is not going to be a horror tour, but I will say bad news is big news, and unfortunately a lot of bad news was recorded. So sorry if every now and then my story is going to be a little bit macabre. Now as the city was walled in, it expanded upwards and inwards, with the coal smoke dyeing the buildings black. Edinburgh was a very dark, black and smoky city. They actually called it Old Reekie. meaning Old Smoky. Now, a lot of the buildings you see here, they actually came from the 19th century. Edinburgh was one of the first cities that had skyscrapers when it was walled in. They were made out of wood and not very stable, and they were probably about twice as high as the buildings you see here. Because they were made out of wood, they were prone to falling. Now, it was one day in 1861, down Paisley Close, which we're going to be approaching in a bit, a big skyscraper collapsed. 50 people died, and they went through the wreckage, pulling out the dead bodies. Now, at the end of the day, they were packing up when they hear this young boy go, "Heave away, chaps! I'm not dead yet." So they heave away, and they pull out young Joseph Macgyver. He managed to survive. Now, it was after they pulled him out, and after that collapse, they passed an act in Parliament about how construction has to be made and how things have to now be made out of brick. So it was in the Victorian era where a lot of these buildings were actually built, but I also like to think they kept the very dark tone. You see, Edinburgh is very close to the borders. It's going to be one of the first cities that one of the first cities that the English are going to see when they invade. So they want the city to look somewhat intimidating. Now, right here is Paisley's Close, and above you can see the head of Joseph Macgyver. "Heave away, chaps, I'm not dead yet." Greek in Scotland, Scotus, means darkness. Yes, that is true. I remember hearing that. That could be one of the reasons why it's called Scotland, because I'm probably going to pronounce it terribly, but I think it's like Scotus means dark and dreary, and basically giving, what's it like, when the priests were reading the Bible, they were reading it in Latin and they're reading it in Greek, and they probably just thought, you know what, this is such a terrible, dark, and not nice looking city, not nice looking place. Let's just call it for what it is. Now, my phone is making it look somewhat bright at the moment, but it's completely clouded over. It is a very, it is a very dark and sort of miserable day. It's actually starting to rain just a little bit. But let me just have a quick look. But thank you, thank you, Pamos. I think I said your name correctly. Sorry if I'm going to say your name's completely wrong, but thank you, Pamos, for that observation about Scotus and, dark and miserable. But now we are within the old town. This is the first day Edinburgh has opened up since, since the lockdown. This is the first weekend, so there's going to be people everywhere. So excuse me if it is going to get a little bit loud. Yes, and this is a very beautiful city, as everyone is saying. I always like to think of it as somewhat dark for a capital city, trying to keep the borders safe. The English are going to come up here and go, "Ooh, I don't want to take over this place." But right here is the beautiful Tron Kirk. Now, the Tron Kirk, Tron is actually the word for scales. Now, going back to the time when Edinburgh was a walled-in city, there wasn't a lot of room, and because of that, most buildings had to be multi-purpose, even churches. So this church wasn't just a church, wasn't just a kirk, it was also where they kept the scales for the city to measure all the produce coming in. Now, this is also one of the places where they used to punish criminals. Well, actually, to be honest, there was a lot of places where they used to punish criminals, but the Tron Kirk, they would sometimes nail people through the ear to the side of the Tron Kirk. Now, the reason why they were doing that is if you were caught breaking the rules of the city, they'll nail you through the ear to the Tron Kirk, and leave you there for 24 hours. That was your punishment. And just so you know, if you ever, you know, when they took the nail out, that dint in your ear actually showed you a bit of a bad boy. It was somewhat cool. But if you completely decide, you know what, stuff this, and you ripped your ear off to walk away, if you had that big rip in your ear, oh, then you're a bit of a coward. I should also point out, a lot of people ask me, what are these? So just to point out what these are, they actually came a couple of years back, unfortunately when some bad events happened down in England. This is just to protect the Royal Mile. This is something very recent. But a lot of people ask me why they are here. It's just to, you know, stop vehicles, or it's a way to sort of close off the mile if need be. But yes, and was it, oh, I'm going to say your name completely wrong. I'm just going to say Neil. Yes, this is a very perfect classic city. I should also mention, Edinburgh is very lucky we did not get bombed. Now, a lot of England, unfortunately, did get bombed in World War II. We only got bombed once in World War I, when a big German Zeppelin came across the city. Now, it was on its way to bomb the Fort Rail Bridge. Just hoping you guys can hear me okay. It's getting quite loud. They were on their way to bomb the Fort Rail Bridge. The problem was, it was so windy here, it got stuck over the port of Leith. So the Zeppelin dropped a bomb on a whiskey distillery. Now, just to sort of, you know, take away the Scots spirits, I guess. Well, that caused a big flood of whiskey to come down one of the streets, and people ran outside with jars and bottles to collect the free whiskey. Then it started heading back towards Edinburgh Castle. They had no way to take down that Zeppelin, so what they did is they ran to the 1 o'clock gun. Then it only had blanks in it. Now, the 1 o'clock gun traditionally went off 8 seconds before 1 o'clock. That way, 8 seconds later, the sound would reach the docks, and the sailors would know exactly when 1 o'clock was. Now, when they started firing the blanks, the Zeppelin thought it was under fire, but, well, it had no real live ammunition left. They only had dummy bombs. So they started dropping off their dummy bombs. There was a great battle here between a cannon firing blanks and a Zeppelin dropping fakes. But now, can everyone hear me okay? Just want to make sure. I got a little thing saying my internet connection wasn't the best. So can everyone hear me? Just let me know. I'd love to hear if you got any questions. Now, we're here at the Mercat Cross. Mercat being the old word for market. The Market Cross. Now, this was a place of public announcement. It was also a place of public punishment as well. And hello, is it Lorraine from New York? I'm sorry if I say your name incorrectly. Hello. Now, this is not the original Mercat Cross. The original Mercat Cross was just over here. Let me take you to it. Now, unfortunately, there is a ground set up in front of it. So there is people set up, but you can just make out, and it's going to be quite loud, so I'm not going to stay here for very long, but you can make out on the ground the outline of where the old Mercat Cross used to be. Now, the original Mercat Cross, that got burnt down. And Alexa, do not... Oh, sorry, I don't want to say your name too much, otherwise I might set off people's devices, but don't feel dumb. Never feel dumb. You're saying, you know, I feel like, oh, it was just a restaurant and a meeting point. No, never feel dumb. Just because you don't know something doesn't mean you're not dumb. Trust me, I learn new things every single day. I actually do think I'm a bit dumb, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you're dumb. Now, anyway, to tell the story of the Mercat Cross and why the original got burnt down, that was due to the Jacobite uprisings. Now, I'm sure many of you have watched Outlander, or at least know something about the Jacobite uprisings. that is when King Charles VII, King James VII comes to the throne. Now, he was a Catholic. Now, they already kicked the Catholics out since Mary Queen of Scots, and the Scots had the facts there was another Catholic on the throne. Now, he only served from 1688 to 1689. He was then booted off the throne in favour of William of Orange, a Protestant king. Now, the Highlanders up north, they were Catholic. They were sticking to the old ways. So they rebelled against the king in 4 separate rebellions. The last one being in 1745 under Bonnie Prince Charlie, James VII's son. Now, he came to the top of the Mercat Cross here, and he announced himself as the true King of Britain. Now, since King James VI, over 100 years prior, a king had not been up here in Scotland. After the union of the crowns, the kings were living down in England. The Scots didn't even know, had never seen what their king even looked like. Now, suddenly, there's someone of royal blood saying, "I am your king, I am the true King of Britain." And the locals here cheered him. At least he's here. Bonnie Prince Charlie then went north and lost the Battle of Culloden. Now, because he made that announcement here, that Catholic king, Bonnie Prince Charlie, they decided to burn down the Mercat Cross. They saw that as a rallying point for the Jacobites. Now, this new Mercat Cross was built up by Queen Victoria. And this was in 1846. She wanted to gentrify the city. Now, I'm going to walk around the front. And hello, BCI from France. Nice to meet you. Now let's continue up the mile. Also, a little bit about Queen Victoria. Now, she gentrified this city. She wanted to make it prettier, and Queen Victoria was a really good queen, but most people remember her for some of her more promiscuous ways. Now, just a second, I just want to talk a second about the kilt. And I'm just going to jump back to me for a moment. Now, the Scottish kilt, that was originally Highlander garb. Think of it almost like a one-piece bodysuit. It didn't just go around the bottom, it went around your entire body. You also would have your socks and shoes. You'd have a skip and do. And 1 second, it's going to get a bit loud, so just one moment. Okay, there we go. You'd have your skip and do, a knife you keep in your sock, and your sporran. And yes, actually, real quick, there is a unicorn on top of the Mercat Cross. I'll just quickly point that out. So there's the unicorn. Now, the unicorn is the national animal of Scotland. I'll get into why in a bit. There we go. Now back to me. Now anyway, there's just the locals having a bit of fun. Now back to me. Now, and back to the kilt. Now, you'd also have a shirt on underneath the kilt, and your sporran, which is the pouch you normally see at the front. Now, traditionally, they say they wore nothing underneath their kilt, which is a little bit of a lie. They used to bring their shirts underneath as almost like underwear. So when they came up with the more classic kilt, and this was in the 19th century, which would just go around the waist. That way, it's actually so the lowlanders here could put on a kilt without spending all morning trying to figure it out. So those big kilts were about 2 foot long and 2 foot wide. They're a big square piece of material you literally have to roll along the ground to put on. The lowlanders here didn't want to spend all morning trying to put their kilts on, so that's why you have the classic kilt, which just goes just around the waist. And it's from there they started with the tradition, because they weren't wearing the traditional shirts, to wear nothing underneath it. Because they didn't actually wear any underwear, they just had their shirt tied over. But they weren't going to do it with the modern shirts. Now, the way you measure your kilt is you're meant to go down on your knees, and it should just go just above the knee. So it should just touch the ground. Now, Queen Victoria, when she came here, she actually wanted to see more. And she ordered that the royal kilt be brought up higher. That way she could see those cute knees of the soldiers. So she was a little bit of a perv, but I don't know, nowadays, knees? She was probably the most innocent perv of all the monarchs. But now, let me just flip you around to the beautiful St. Giles Cathedral. You have Queen Victoria Day, do you? Neil, that is great. Awesome. Queen Victoria was a great monarch. I could do, like, if you ever go down to England, they, like, go on one of our Sandeman's tours, they can do entire spiels about Queen Victoria. She was very, they always make her out to be very promiscuous. But anyway, St. Giles Cathedral. Now we know there's been a church here since around 850 BC. Now it became St. Giles Cathedral in 1232. And St. Giles is the patron saint of lepers and cripples. Now the legend is he was an 8th century monk who saved a deer by taking an arrow through the leg. Now that's what I've read, but all the pictures have him having an arrow through the hand. But either way, that's how he became the patron saint of both lepers and cripples. Now St. Giles is the patron saint of Edinburgh, with the patron saint of Scotland being St. Andrew. Now in 1232 is when it was established. There's also a, you can see at the very, very top, there is a Golden Rooster. Now that goes back to the time after the Scots broke away from the Catholic Church and they start embracing, Protestantism. The problem is there's many different versions of Protestantism all competing with each other. Now each had their slightly different rules, slightly different beliefs. And the way they'd stand out is by having a different symbol. The problem was certain beliefs would come in and out of popularity, and when a church would change religion, change denomination of Christianity, they'd actually change at the very top the symbol. And because they were using this because they had to keep going to the top and changing over the symbols, St. Giles Cathedral wisely came up with with this idea of, let's just put a golden rooster up there. It looks pretty, and no matter what religion this church is, we have a golden rooster up there. That later got adopted by many Protestant faiths. Then nowadays, if you're going up to north in Scotland, if you see a church, if it's got a cross at the top, more than likely it's Catholic. If it's got a golden rooster, it's definitely Protestant, and that's how you can tell the difference. Oh, Diana, my mother also watched Queen Victoria and that entire series. I also saw the movie. The movie wasn't that accurate, to be honest. Also, just so you know, so I've seen a few movies about that. I was actually thinking, I saw a movie recently about Mary Queen of Scots. Mary Queen of Scots actually had a French accent, not a Scottish accent. Just a little bit of trivia. But I'll finish off on St. Giles. Now, right here, this is where the Reformation took place. This is where, two big things. First of all, there was the Scottish Reformation. That was by John Knox. I'll get an image of him up real quick. The great religious reformer, he's the one who really helped break the Scots away from the Catholic Church and embrace Protestantism. It's also where the Covenanters started. Now the Covenanters, they were a Presbyterian sect of the Scottish Church, and they were against the Anglicans. They did not believe in divine right. It all started when King Charles II started changing the prayer books. Now the minister came in and was going to sing out the prayers, and when they realised the prayers were different, a lady called Jenny Geddes got up and threw her stool at the minister, and by stool I mean chair. And that act of insurrection is what really started the Covenanters, this underground movement of the king has no right when it comes to spiritual affairs. Now if you want to hear more about the Covenanters, I'd probably say come along on my horror tour, which I'll be doing. Now, something else I need to point out, one moment. And guys, ask questions. I do know quite often on tours when people are not asking questions, they're just listening. They are. It does kind of mean they're enjoying, they're paying attention. But I do want to hear a few questions come my way, just about what's going on. Now, I want to point out the heart of Midlothian. Now, this heart signifies the old execution spot. Now, there's two things in life you can't escape, and that is death and taxes. Now, where the car park is today, just over here, that's where the tax office used to be. So why not kill people in front of the tax office door? Now, there used to be a big silver heart on the tax office door, so when they brought the heart down, they put a heart out here to symbolise where the execution spot used to be. Sorry, my gimbal's being a little funny on this angle. Now, nowadays it's tradition to spit on it. Now, it said that people used to spit on the silver heart because they didn't like to pay their taxes. So when they put a heart out here, people then started spitting on the centre of this heart to sort of stick it to the man. Now, unfortunately, a lot of tourists, I should say, think this is a love heart. And this is actually a very popular place for someone to propose to their loved one. But let's carry on. We're going to head up towards the castle. And hello, Eric from Hawaii. Nice to meet you. I also want to point out the statue of David Hume just over here. Now, David Hume, he was the great philosopher, also a great drinker as well. But his key philosophy was reason is the slave of passion, which means you come up with your conclusions first. As in, you'll look at someone and go, yeah, I know what this guy's like. It's not until someone questions you, you actually find the logic to make that all make sense. But he thought that was the better way to live. You have to live with your passion first. You try nothing but logically, you're insane. Now you can see he's wearing a toga. Now I mentioned earlier about the Jacobite uprising. Now, the Jacobite uprising, after the Jacobites were crushed, they actually outlawed the Kilt and they outlawed the Gaelic language here. So they had to embrace other cultures. Now, so at one point, we actually called ourselves the Athens of the North. We embraced a lot of Greek culture. And that was David Hume's time period, so that's why he is in a toga. David Hume was also very, very much overweight. They want to build a fat Greek statue, so they thinned him out, and as you can see, he's got some biceps. Some really good biceps going. He also has it used to be a polished toe at the front. It used to be a lot more polished than that because the locals would rub it to get a bit of wisdom from David Hume. However, people don't rub the toe now for good reason. Now I'm going to head a bit further up. Yes, Diana, death and taxes. Two things you can't escape. And now I'm going to head up the mile. And one thing I love about Edinburgh is how small this city is. You can just run into people you know. Hey, Marta. I will say, if you live in Edinburgh, one thing I do really love, quite often, if I ever want to see a friend, I can just walk around the streets and just bump into someone I know. Edinburgh is beautiful in that way. Everything's close together. Everything is easy to get around. But I also want to point out Deacon Brodie's Tavern. How long do you... quick question, how long do you need to stay to really know this city? I'd probably say you could get a really, really good taste of it in about a week. The thing is, being a tour guide, I've been a tour guide for 8 years, and still to this day I learn more things. This is such a deeply rooted, layered city. There is so much to do, so much to hear about. So, if you're going to come though, I'd say stay a week. Stay a week, walk around, and even after a week you wouldn't be bored. So a week is a good one. But on to Deacon Brodie. Now, Deacon Brodie, you can see there's one illustration of him looking really, really nice, like a nice nobleman. And another illustration of him with the, villain mustache and, the longer dark hair stealing stuff. Deacon Brodie was a 18th century nobleman who had a respectable family. He had a respectable job as a cabinet maker and a locksmith. But at night he would drink and gamble, and he'd go down to the grass markets where he had 2 other wives. Now, I'm just going to walk through this court here, so my reception might go a little bit off because I'm going to be underground for a moment. 1 second. Now, he had 2 other wives down in the grass markets on the other end. And those 3 wives did not know of each other. Now, to fund this dual lifestyle, he would drink. He would drink, but to fund this dual lifestyle, he would gamble and make a lot of money. But no, to really fund this dual lifestyle, he used to rob the houses he made locks for. And the police are baffled. There's all this burglars without forced entry, so they decided they must hire a master of locks to find another master of locks. So they hired Deacon Brodie to find himself. And he had a blast. One second, I'm being accused of being a ghost. As I said, you always run into people, Thank you very much. Okay. That guy just sort of jumped out at me. Okay, to continue on. Now, Deacon Brodie, he thought he was a master criminal. The problem was, his ego got the better of him. He decided to rob the tax office. Now, he got caught. He was arrested. Word got around about that he had 2 wives. 3 wives. People put 2 and 2 together, realised he was the burglar. So he decided, you know what, just hang me. He didn't want to go back to his 3 wives. So he's hanged in the grass markets. So in the lawn market here, sorry. Lawn, grass, anyway. Now, after he was hanged in the lawn markets, there was a young man who was watching him who owned a cabinet that was made by a young Deacon Brodie. Now, he passed that down in his family as an heirloom. That went to his great-grandson, Robert Louis Stevenson, and he wrote The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, based on Deacon Brodie. And I just want to show you a little animation I have of Deacon Brodie, which I think really encapsulates his character. And as I'm talking about this, I just want to point out the Writers' Museum right here. This goes back to 1622. It's quite old. Lady Stairs, who owned the building, was a big fan of writers, and so she used to donate her money to help get a lot of their writings published. Later, one of her descendants dedicated this building to her by making it the Writers' Museum. Yeah, the small stone buildings are really cute. This is a 16th century court here. I'm going to get rid of Deacon Brodie. 1 second. Hello? You can see someone else walking around with a gimbal. Nice to see you again. Hello, gimbal versus gimbal. So, yeah, now, you can see this is an active city. Now, we're going to go around here. I just want to point something out. I want to point out the steps here. Actually, I might have to do it from the other angle. Now you can see how that step right in the centre there is cut short. That's called the Scottish trip step. Now, when someone would break into your house in the middle of the night, he'd be creeping up your stairs in the dark. And he doesn't know that one of your steps is cut short. So the idea is he slips and falls down the stairs. It's actually known as the Scottish burglar alarm as well. The problem was people would come home drunk off their nut and they would not remember in the dark which one was their trip step. So it actually hurt the tenants of the house way more than it ever hurt a burglar. But now we're going to go through a little court over here. It's going to get a bit loud, so I might just go quiet just for a second. Okay. But now we're going to start heading up towards the beautiful Edinburgh Castle. But to get there, we got to head down a close. Now, close is short for enclosure. Everything close together. Here is a wider close you can see. And here is a much more common one. Now, when the city was walled in, that was the way you'd get into your apartment, by going down these super narrow closes. Even during the day, these closes get very, very dark. You can see we've installed lights there, just so people can see where they're going. Now, it would all be closed over, and legally, they had to be at least one coffin wide. Now, that's so if someone passes away, you can get their body out without everyone seeing it. But now, we're going to head down the close. Ever been to the Writers' Museum? Would you recommend it? Of course, yes, Nadia, I've been to the Writers' Museum and I would recommend it, especially on a cold day. It is a really, really nice, warm place. I'm not sure, I can't guarantee when it's going to open next. Also, my reception's probably going to go out just a little bit. Hopefully you'll get to see some of this narrow close. But obviously, I'm now completely bricked in. But I can't guarantee when it'll reopen, but I will say do check out when it is. Went to the Writers' Museum on a school trip. Ross, what did you think of the Writers' Museum? I'll give Ross a moment to respond. One thing is, whenever I'm going around this city and I'm doing my recommendations, I'm always doing it as a bit of a history buff, as in what places to me seem nice and historical, rather than what places are just warm and comfortable and really nice to look at. Now, I don't think my opinion is right. I know a lot of people ask me, where's a really nice place that's not very touristy to check out? And I always say, well, no, check out the touristy places. There's a reason why they're touristy. They're awesome. I also want to point out the hub. Now, this used to be St. John's Kirk, going back to 1775. Now, this is during the time when they outlawed the Kilt and they outlawed the Gaelic language during the after the Jacobite uprisings. Yet they still did all their sermons in traditional Gaelic. They somehow got away with it. Now, when they started desanctifying these churches, you've got to remember, when they started to expand outwards, they were taking down the walls, there was actually too many churches in the centre. You can see there's a church here and a church over here. There's actually another church just further down this road over there, and there was a church a little further down, well, the St. Giles is just over there, and there was actually another church between St. Giles and this corner here. So they started desanctifying the places, using them as other buildings. Nowadays, it's the headquarters for the Edinburgh International Festival. Well, let's head further up. Now, and I just really love these old buildings. Now, one reason why they are so dark, a lot of people ask me, why don't they just clean them up? Why don't they make them look prettier? It's because of the sandstone. They didn't temper it correctly, and if you try to clean sandstone with a high pressure hose, unfortunately it does go back to sand. So it's one of the reasons why these buildings here are just so so dirty. They haven't found a good way to clean them yet. You can also see all those chimneys at the top of the roof. That goes back to a time when the only heating you had was, well, a fire pit. Edinburgh is a cold city, so there used to be fire pits in every room needed, and that was just a way to get the coal smoke out. One thing you'll see when you're walking around Edinburgh, I'm not sure how well you can see it on my camera, but on the top of a lot of the buildings there are heaps and heaps of little chimneys. Can you tell me what the differences are? Okay, the big difference between Glasgow and Edinburgh, I'll say Glasgow is a much newer city. You see, Glasgow came around during the second industrial revolution. Hold on, wait, 1 second. No, it started picking up in the first industrial revolution, and then really picked up in the second. And so Glasgow is a much more modern city, and it's much bigger. It's more industrial, and it is a beautiful city. It's actually a place. I don't want any locals here. I'd actually say, in terms of nightlife, it has slightly better nightlife than Edinburgh. So I would recommend Glasgow, but it doesn't have old buildings like this. I mean, it does have some. In fairness, it does have some old buildings. It wasn't like it was stagnant until the industrial revolutions, but that's when it sort of really came about. Edinburgh has more history and has a... Okay, I'm not going to say that out loud just in case. I mean, I do agree. It does have the better soccer team, but I just don't know who's listening. Okay? There's a lot of passion when it comes to that sport. But now we're coming up closer to the castle, and here we are. The beautiful Edinburgh Castle. Now we know there's been a settlement here since around 850 BC. The Romans said that there was a small wooden fortification up here called Dun Eden. Now the Voldini, the people who lived up here, that's what the Romans called them, they worshipped the 9 sisters. And so the Romans called the place Dun Eden, the castle of the Maidens. Yes, Kirk and church. Yes, Michael? Or say, is that Michelle? Is that they are the same thing. I should also point out real quick, I just want to say sorry if I do say your names a little bit backwards. Bit of a confession, I am a little bit dyslexic, and especially when it's tiny little words on the screen and I don't have the best eyesight, I might really get your names wrong. So if I do get it wrong, I'm really sorry. But anyway, well, back to the Castle of the Maidens. Now apparently at the top there was a big shrine to Morgan le Fay. I'm putting her on the screen because I'm a big fan of the Arthurian legend. Now Morgan le Fay was a mother goddess at the time. She was actually called Mordern. In the Arthurian legend, they actually confused her with the Morrigan, an Irish goddess. So they were hearing about both a war goddess, which was the Morrigan, and Mordern, a mother goddess. And so they thought, well, she must be both. And if you actually read the Arthurian legend, she is both. She starts off as a bad guy and ends as a good guy. But there was a big shrine here to Mordern. That was the main goddess of the Voldini who lived up here. Now, after the Romans leave, unfortunately, we lose a lot of the written accounts. The next written account comes from the 7th century. That was the Gododin. That was a poem about a king called Mindadog the Open-Handed, who had a massive feast up here in Dun Eden. He then took his men down south to fight the Angles, and they are slaughtered on the battlefield. And in that poem is the first historical reference to King Arthur. So, the Arthurian legend, a lot of people say, well, we're not sure where the Arthurian legend exactly started, but the first ever reference was right here, a poem about Edinburgh Castle. Now, the reference was Gwenlog, although he left many for the ravens to feed, was no Arthur, saying there was a great warrior called Gwenlog, who slaughtered a lot of men because the ravens were known to feast on dead bodies, but he wasn't as good as this legendary Arthur figure. Now, after the Gododin and Mindadog's men fell to the Angles came up here and gave Dun Eden an Anglo name. He dropped the Pictish Dun, changed Eden to Edin, and had their own word for the fortification, Borough. So hence Edinburgh is established. So Edinburgh is established. The locals say Edinburgh. As you can tell, even though I've got an Australian accent, I've been living here for a while. So I say it the way the Scots do, Edinburgh. Now, the Angles hold the settlement until around 1080. And that's when Malcolm II, who really established Scotland what it is today, a lot of people actually trace the first king back to him, Malcolm II. He was the one who took over the castle for the Scots and kept it for the Scots. However, he kept the name Edinburgh. And unfortunately, no, it's not open. It is not open yet. Hopefully it will be open next month, which is very, well, okay. It might be open on Monday. We're still waiting to find out. Unfortunately, these times are a little unsteady. So it's not open at the moment, but next broadcast I do, if it is open, I'll make sure to mention it. Thank you for that, Shannon. Now, to continue on, I want to point out David's Tower here, which used to be 3 times tall, that building in the round shape. Sorry if it's going a little bit dark. Now, David's Tower, that was built by David II. And to give you an idea of what it would have looked like just from the inside, here's what David's Tower looked like. Right next to David's Tower itself, 3 times taller, it's one of the oldest parts of Edinburgh Castle. Now that came down in the Lang Siege of 1573, when the English came up here for 3 days solid, bombarded David's Tower, and the tower fell, so that's why it's only 1/3 of the size. They now call it the Half Moon Battery. Another thing is this is where the Stone of Destiny lies. The Stone of Destiny, the coronation stone of every Scottish king. That was, as I mentioned earlier, the crown, Kenneth MacAlpin, the first legendary king of Scotland. He is historical. He did exist, but we don't know too much about his life. But he was seated on that stone and coronated, and then Edward I stole it, and all the English kings were crowned on it. Then came the Union of the Crowns with King James VI, where he took over Queen Elizabeth I's throne. Now, after he takes over and there's the uniting of the crowns, James VI did not send the stone back to Scotland. He wanted to keep it down here with him. It wasn't until 1996 when the stone was finally returned through a political maneuver. Now, that's when it was returned. There was also some students. There was Ian Hamilton and his gang who managed to steal I shouldn't use the word steal. They retrieved the stone. And they brought it up here in 1950. Now, they actually stole it from... I've got to stop saying steal, because quite often I get corrected by it. They retrieved the stone in 1950. They managed to actually get it out of Westminster Abbey. They brought it back up here to Scotland, and they left it in the Arbroath, the Arbroath Church in Angus. And the idea was the Scots would not let it leave again. Unfortunately, the police took the stone all the way back down to England, and the Scots didn't even know it was here by the time it returned. But anyway, it returned in 1996 when Tony Blair, he decided he needed to win the election, but he needed the vote of the Scottish people. So he said to the Scots, vote for me, and you get your stone back. And so Tony Blair was elected, and true to his word, the stone finally returned. And yes, Shannon, the oldest part goes back to 1130, and that is Margaret's Chapel. Now, Margaret's Chapel, named for Queen Margaret, Queen to Malcolm III. Now, there's a theory that they actually built the chapel there to Christianise the site, because there used to be the shrine there to Morgan le Fray. Now, that was taken down by the early Christians. So after that was taken down, they still wanted to Christianise the site, and they built the chapel there to Queen Margaret, who later became Saint Margaret, Queen to Malcolm III. Now, one thing I also want to point out, because I know we have at least one Canadian here, is I'm actually standing on Canadian soil. Now, right here, you can see the sigil for Nova Scotia. 1 second, let me get that on camera. Here we are. The sigil for Nova Scotia. Now, the reason why this is Canadian soil is because It's just also the top part. We're actually not entirely sure where the border is, but I am standing in Canada right now. That's because when they started colonising Nova Scotia and Canada, you actually had to be standing on Canadian soil to make the purchase. Now, a lot of the nobles, they wanted to buy land in Canada, but, to show their authority, but however, they didn't want to go to Canada. So they decided to make the top part of Edinburgh Castle, the Esplanade, Canadian soil, so you could stand here and make the deal. So yes, this is Canada right here. But now I've just realised I better get a wriggle on. So, before we head off from the castle, I just want to mention, because I'm a big fan of Arthurian legend, you can just see Arthur's seat over there, off in the distance. There's a few legends why this is called Arthur's seat. Some say that King Arthur came to the top and watched his armies defeated the Angles. Others say he came to the top and watched his armies defeat the Picts and the Scots, if you read the original Geoffrey of Monmouth tale. But the other legend is that Merlin came to the top and put 15 crosses up there. Now, Arthur's seat, by the way, the big mountain you can see off in the distance I'm trying to focus on. Now, Merlin came to the top and put 15 crosses up there, and only the purest of knights could get their horse to the top and tie it. If you're not a pure knight, you would go insane. Now, that is my personal favourite, because as I walk down to the next part, I want to tell you about Merlin. A little bit about Merlin. You see, he's believed to be inspired by a Scot called Lailekin. Now, Lailekin was the advisor to the last pagan king here in Scotland, a man called Gwendoline. Now, he was a warrior, he was a bard, he was a druid, he was a holy person, and he said to and we also believe he might have been Gwendolu's son, and I'll get into why in a bit. But he told the last pagan king, you have to take down the Christian king of Strathclyde, otherwise our religion will never flourish again. So him and his men went to Strathclyde, and they are completely slaughtered by the Christian king. Now, the only person to survive was Lailekin. Now, he goes mad with grief because his king and his men died due to his advice. So he runs into the Caledonian forests, nowadays near where Glasgow is. He then re-emerged years later, apparently with the power of prophecy, and he used to interrupt religious ceremonies, shouting out his prophecies. Now, Lailekin, he actually had a sister called Lengruith, a twin sister, and Lengruith, she married the Christian king that killed, slaughtered Gwendoline's forces. Now, the reason why we think maybe they were both related to the king, maybe son and daughter, is because it makes sense that Roderick Hill, the Christian king, wanted to marry a princess, even if it was a pagan princess. But his twin sister Lengruith said to a priest called Mongo, please bring my brother back to society. So Mongo spoke to him, and Lailekin and Mongo became friends, and one day Lailekin went up to Mongo and said, you now must give me communion, for today I'll die a triple death. However, by this point, no one was calling Lailekin Lailekin. They were calling him Merlin, and Merlin means madman, because he was interrupting those religious ceremonies. So Mongo gave Lailekin the communion, made him a Christian. Then later that day, he was captured by a group of shepherds, and he was stabbed, stoned, and drowned. So he did die his triple death. Now, Mongo went on to become Saint Mongo, and Lailekin got better known around the town as Merlin, the madman. He then got mixed into the Arthurian legend. Now, but the thing was, Merlin in French actually means the shitter, so they changed it to Merlin. Now, it's said that the madman, we used to go to the Dumpsy Crag, which is in Holyrood Park, where Arthur's seat is today, where there was a massive rocking stone, and he used to do rituals up there. So we might have had, just briefly, the original Merlin right here in Edinburgh. But now, the Castle Esplanade and the Royal... Okay, someone's asking me about the military tattoo. Yes, that is on the Castle Esplanade. I'm going to flip around my camera now. The castle Esplanade that I just walked off, unfortunately we're going to jump away from there because I don't have a lot of time at the moment. But to explain the military tattoo, well, first of all, the word is meant to be an onomatopoeia. When they're playing the drums, you hear this tattoo, tattoo. Now that came from the time when the soldiers, when they were going from barracks to barracks, when they were going from barracks to barracks, they were allowed a few hours in the town to sort of, have a few drinks. And to get the soldiers back to the barracks, they used to send through the marching bands. And they'd go tattoo, tattoo, to get the soldiers back. Now those marching bands would love to sometimes do shows and show off. And then here in Edinburgh, they decided to invite marching bands from all around the world to show off their marching formations and show off their songs. And that was the start of the Edinburgh military tattoo. But now let's jump to our final stop. I've got to go, it's a little bit of a walk, so I'm going to be walking a bit fast. I do realise I've already hit the hour mark, but there's still a bit more of the city I really want to show off. Now we're going to head down towards the grass market. It's probably going to be a little loud down here. Probably will show off the grass markets on my horror tour when it's going to be later and maybe a bit quieter, probably on a weeknight. It's going to be really busy as we walk down there now. But we're going down now Victoria Street. You might remember I mentioned this street before. Every shop on this street is painted a different colour. And it's meant to represent what that shop sells. It is a beautiful street. I also want to point out my favourite shop, Cutty Sark. Now that's an old tale. It's a moral tale. As the story goes, it's the 16th century, and there was a farmer called Tam O'Shanty who went to the market, sold really well that day. So to reward himself, he decides to have a few drinks at the pub. Now suddenly it's dark. It's time to get home. So Tom jumps on his horse, and as he's riding home, he comes across a group of witches all sitting around a fire. Now he knows he should not be messing with witches. So he slows his horse down. He goes as quietly as he can. And then suddenly, this young witch stands up with a very short skirt and a very tight shirt. And she does this dance around the fire. Now, Cutty Sark actually means short skirt. And after doing this tantalising dance, Tom, he's overwhelmed with emotion and yells out, "Well done, Cutty Sark!" Well done, short skirt. Well, the witches chase him. Let me just flip my camera around. The witches decide they're going to chase him. Now, apparently witches, they can't cross running water. So he heads to the nearest bridge. And as soon as he gets to the bridge, the witch catches up to him and pulls off the horse's tail. Now, there is a moral to this story. Don't be mesmerised by women in short skirts. That is the moral. Is Oink still there? Yes, Oink is still there. 1 second. It's closed, but that pink shop over there, that is Oink. And it is still open. But here we are, beautiful Victoria Street. But now let's head to the final stop. We're going to head through the grass markets. I want to start telling you the story about a dog. Actually, before I get to the final story, I've got a little bit of a walk. Do we have any quick questions before I get to my final story? Any quick questions? Well, while I wait, I should also point out the joke shop with the nose on the top. And also, Armstrong's just over there. That is a second-hand vintage shop. If you come to Edinburgh and you want to get yourself a nice kilt, check out Armstrong's. It's much cheaper there. But anyway, let's start heading up into the beautiful Greyfriars Kirk, our final stop. Because I want to take a moment to talk about Bobby the dog. And I keep saying I'm going to talk about him, and I just realised how loud it's getting here, so I might just quickly move past this area, because there's a lot of cars, and I don't want them to interfere with the mic, so let me just get through here, and I'll start the story. Okay, so talk a little bit about Greyfriars Bobby. Now, Bobby was the dog to a night watchman, a man called John Grey. Now, John Grey had a very tough job. Somehow by himself, had had to convince groups of up to 10 men not to commit a crime, which is a very tough job for one man to do. So he needed a dog for protection. Now, most get big dogs. John decided to get a tiny Skye Terrier as his guard dog, because he wanted to be the nice night watchman. He'd go up to groups of men and go, "Right lads, settle it down." They would look at him, then look down and see a cute little dog. And they go, "Aw," and they'd bend down and pat him. Now, they called his little dog Bobby, because Bobby was slang for police officer. And John and Bobby patrolled suits together for 2 years, cleaning up the crime, until unfortunately John died of tuberculosis. Now hold that thought for a moment, because I just want to quickly show off the back windows to the Elephant House Cafe. Now, just above where it says Harvey's Furniture Stores, that's where J.K. Rowling wrote a lot of the first 2 of the Harry Potter books. You should actually look out those windows and see the graveyard here. And she actually went through Greyfriars Kirk and wrote down a list of names, and some of those names found their way into the Harry Potter books. And if you want to learn more about Greyfriars Kirk, you gotta come along to my horror tour. Anyway, back to Bobby. Now, when John died, he was buried right here in Greyfriars Kirk. You can see where a group of people are. Now, luckily I've got a gimbal, so I can still watch in the background and point out where the grave is. And it's right where that lady is standing in black. Now, when he was buried here, little Bobby came. He was now a stray dog, and he sat on his master's grave. Now, he was a loyal dog. He did not want to leave his master's side. Now, the first thing the monks do is they kick him off, because you can't have dogs in a cemetery. But no matter what the monks did, little Bobby kept finding his way inside. He's just got to be close to his master. Now, James Brown, who's actually the smaller... Now, I just want to point out, I don't want to interrupt another tour guide. There's tour guide respect. But you can see where the lady is standing. The bigger grave is the grave of John Grey, and the smaller one is the grave of James Brown. He was a local butcher who used to feed Greyfriars Bobby every day just after 1 o'clock. He'd sneak inside and give him some food. Now, eventually the monks do fall in love with Bobby, and on cold nights they'd come outside and collect him. Now, Bobby does become a tourist attraction. Now, the city council comes in here and presents Bobby the keys to the city, making him legally a citizen. That also gave him the right to vote, before women could vote. Now, little Bobby survived almost 14 years after his master's death. But when he died, they couldn't bury him here for its holy earth. So they actually buried him somewhere near the gates where we're heading to right now. We're actually a little unsure as to where he's buried. But since Bobby's death, There've been a lot of books written about him. There's been 3 movies based on him. There's also an episode of Futurama based on him as well. And there's also a reference in Family Guy, funny enough. You can also see a lot of Bobby artwork all around, such as right here, the little Skye Terrier. And in 1981, they put up the Bobby Memorial Stone here. Now, as you can see, there's sticks. People leave Bobby sticks so they can go play fetch in the afterlife. There's also the Bobby statue, which I'm going to show you. But the thing about the statue is it's a little bit of a lie. You see, that statue is actually not Bobby. It's Bobby's girlfriend. Now, it might get a little loud out here, so I might have to jump back into the graveyard to finish the story.
Like, I'm good.
But later in life, Bobby actually had a girlfriend. A female dog sat next to him. And they would share in their food. Also, Bobby was getting quite old. And so he would sleep for longer inside Greyfriars Kirk, and the girlfriend would come out and she'd sit there. And the monks loved the fact there was a new dog taking up, a new dog basically keeping the tourism coming, taking up the morning shift. And when Bobby died, his girlfriend still sat there as the second dog. And so it was after his death they decided to model the statue on his girlfriend. So right here, the statue, which I actually don't recommend, don't rub the nose, the locals don't really like it. But this statue of Bobby, it's not Bobby, it's his girlfriend. And hello Razor, nice to meet you as well. Hope you caught most of the tour, but that is my tour, everyone. So I'm going to stop here with Greyfriars Bobby. Now, as I said before, if you really like this tour, the best way to help me out is by by donating to my PayPal. You'll see the links below. Also, check out my Instagram. I am that guide with glasses, and also check out my Facebook page as well. Just look up That Guide with Glasses. Check out my other tours. As I said before, I do virtual Harry Potter tours and virtual horror tours. So I'd love to see you all there. Also, if you got any more comments, do put them down. I will read them after the tour. Okay? I will read them, and hopefully I'll be able to comment on them. And I'll be able to see, my favourite comment from the last tour was when my internet connection went down and someone wrote, "Did he just ghost us?" That was pretty hilarious. So you'll see all my links there. It would help me out a lot, and my wife as well, if you could donate. But if not, one thing that you can also do is just spread awareness. I do want to hear more people, see more people in the chat. I'd love to do all that stuff, and I'd love to just interact with the people as much as I can. So, thank you everyone for coming along. I'm just going to leave this going for a few more minutes. And if there's any more questions, do let me know. But in the meantime, I'm going to be walking up the street here. But everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. I do know I went a little over time, but thank you so much for coming.